Hey guys, our guest today is Joe Cadwell. Joe's a part of the Pacific Northwest Carpenters Institute, which is the local branch of the UBC, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters. This is the big union that carpenters and a lot of construction guys are involved with. So we talk about unions. We also talk about a big portion of Joe's career, which was underwater, not just welding, but also welding, but I should say commercial diving. This means installations and inspections and rigging and all kinds of things that happen under the water with these really specialized and highly trained divers who are making our world function. And Joe's had a lot of expertise and experience and really a whole career doing that. So I really enjoyed this. Joe has a podcast of his own, Grit Nation, which we will link to, which is a good place to find out more if you like what you hear from him. Without any further ado, Joe Cadwell. Thank you for coming, taking time out of your schedule. And the first, I think, question I have for you is I'd love to hear more about the Northwest Institute of Carpentry, or Carpenters Institute, and kind of what you do there. And then later, let's talk about the trades, getting into it, apprenticeship programs, all those types of things. But first of all, tell us about the Carpentry Institute there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Nate, for having me on your show. Again, my name is Joe Cadwell, and I do work at the Pacific Northwest Carpenters Institute, which is based in Portland. We are a regional training center for the Northwest Carpenters Union, which is one of the 23 regional councils for the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. And if for a lot of listeners who maybe don't know what the UBC is, it's an organized labor union that's been around for 141 years. It's international, which means all of the US and Canada is represented. And we have 500,000 members. And the UBC has been in the business for, again, 141 years, bettering its members' lives.
Wow. Oh, wow. I did not realize it was a part of a huge chapter. So is that like are there other carpenter unions or trade unions around carpentry besides that, or is that basically it for carpentry in North
That,
America?
That's a great question, Nate, and we are it. When you think of a carpenters union, the UBC is the carpenters union, just like you have the IBEW for the electrical workers, or the plumbers union, or the Teamsters for the truckers, or
Uh-huh.
the iron workers union. We are the carpenters, the UBC. And our main office, or our headquarters, I should say, is based in Washington, D.C., and we have our main training center is in Las Vegas, and we
Oh.
offer classes in Las Vegas that build leadership development, train the trainers. It's sort of the showpiece or the flagship of all of our training centers collectively there in Las Vegas.
Oh, that's cool. Carpentry is such a broad term, and you obviously think about, like, I think about either framing a house or even like a carpenter of old times, like making furniture and shaving wood with like a hand plane. But I know on your website and in general, carpentry actually, at least in terms of the union, encompasses a lot of other aspects of construction besides framing. So what else is a part of the carpenters union and the trade as far as you guys are concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about the Carpenters Union, we don't really do the home building type of carpentry. We do have a very small faction that does do that, but we're really commercial construction. And the craft itself, or the UBC, represents a number of different crafts, from a general carpenter to someone who does interior and exterior finishes. They're known as EIS specialists. We work with floor layers. We work with millwrights. We work with scaffold directors. We have pile drivers, which work putting in the foundations inshore on skyscrapers, or on the water, where they do a lot of work on the water. And then my particular craft, while I have been in the UBC for the last 24 years, has been commercial diving. And I worked as a commercial diver for 30 years, of which 22 were with the UBC. And it's only been the last few years that I've switched over to education here in the Northwest.
Wow. So how'd you get involved with diving as a profession? That's not every tradesman has that as their career.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually started diving when I was 12 years old. I was living in Northern California, and my next door neighbors got scuba certified They had a son who was 2 years older than I was, and I just wanted to tag along with that family. And when I started doing that, I started with just free diving, snorkeling, so to speak,
Uh-huh.
mass fins and snorkel. They would be doing scuba in Lake Folsom there in Sacramento, and I thought it was just magical. And so I really pestered my folks to get myself a scuba certification for Christmas. And I was 12 years old, and they thought, well, this is just going to be a passing phase fad for a kid, and it wasn't. I was hooked from the very get go. As soon as I strapped on a tank and put in a regulator and started breathing underwater, I knew that this was going to be something I wanted to pursue in earnest. And so I did, and I actually really focused on getting as much time in the water as I could, but still not being able to do much. But I knew that it was going to be a career, and if I wanted to make diving a career, I would have to join the military. And I think we're going to get into career options a little bit
Yeah.
later in our conversation. But I didn't have the grades to consider going to college. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Navy diver, and so 3 days after exiting high school, I was on a delayed entry program, and I was on my way to boot camp, which then
Huh.
transitioned to an A school where I learned the skill of welding. And then I took that skill set and I went to U.S. Navy Deep Sea Diving School, second class diver school in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And pretty tough school to make it through, but I made it, and I was out in the fleet afterwards as a salvage diver on a ship called the USS Recovery, based out of Little Creek, Virginia, the amphib base on the East Coast.
Wow. So I'm sure the Navy and all the military is using diving for all types of specific applications. Talk about what some of those are, and then what salvage entails, what you were doing, at that early part of your career.
Yeah, you bet. So the Navy, when you think about diving in the Navy, I think most people instinctively go to the SEALs, the
Right.
special ops folks, and the SEALs, sea, air, and land special forces, use diving as a vehicle to get to where we're going. And the ship that I was on for a period of time, we served as a platform for the SEALs to use their um, underwater vehicles in which to perform their operations. But the SEALs really, again, it's just part of their shtick. The Navy divers are the ones that actually do the repairs on the ships. They can also be involved in the salvage work. Oh, and then there's one other component, Nate. It's EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, also uses diving as a vehicle to get
Hmm.
to do their job. But I specialized in hard hat diving. We call it the second class dive school. After second class, if you were in the fleet long enough, you would stay, or in the program long enough, you would then go to first class dive school where you would learn mixed gas theory. And then after mixed gas, there was always the option to go into sat diving at that period of time. But I actually did 4 years in the military. During that period of time, I was a salvage diver. And my claim to fame, the one thing that I did not have the opportunity to do, but was so close to happening, was when the Challenger blew up back in the early 80s, the space shuttle, the
Yeah.
Challenger. And my sister ship and my ship were down for repairs, and it was a race to see who was going to get their vessel operational and head down to Florida from Virginia, and they beat us
Wow.
to it. And so I missed that out of that one, but honestly, I've done some really amazing things in the water with construction, and lots of adventures to talk about if you're interested in
Yeah.
where I went after the Navy.
When I think about like repairing a ship underwater, I instantly think, okay, there's a hole and the ship is sinking and you got to like patch that hole. But I'm sure there's a lot of other kind of routine maintenance. And these ships are huge. What all like what is some of that? Like what does that mean? Maintaining ships like underwater? You're like finding like grease fittings and like greasing things, or
Yeah,
what
I
all is
mean,
happening?
there's that aspect. There's hull cleaning is a big part of it, making sure that the barnacles are not slowing down the speed of the vessel. But
Okay.
when you really think about ships repair, things that can't be done in a dry dock, or it's not feasible, or it's something that is better suited to be done in the water, could be pulling off a prop, and doing
Uh,
prop replacements. Massive props on the back of Navy vessels can be pulled off in water and replaced in water.
oh wow.
There's packings that need to be repacked. There's sea chests that need to be cleaned so they have good inflow of water for cooling systems. Repairs to rudders. But ideally, you always want to try to get a vessel into dry dock, and you literally lift a ship up out of the water. And that's something else that divers do. They'll set the blocks so that in a dry dock, so when the ship comes in to line up, it's not going to crush something that is on the bottom of the ship, and and make sure that the
Wow.
ship doesn't tip over in the dry dock. So, yeah,
What
diving is.
what does
Oh, go
hard
ahead.
hat refer to? You said a hard hat diver. What does that
Well, great. Yeah,
mean?
again, most people think of diving. They think of scuba, and that's
Yeah.
self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. It's a tank and it's a regulator. We actually use the helmets that most people are probably familiar with. The old brass helmets, the giant Mark V dive helmet
Yeah.
is a thing of the past, and now they've for the last 40 years or so, Kirby Morgan diving helmets are the name in the industry, and it's just a way to protect the diver's head. It has a small internal space. You actually have an oral nasal cup that your mouth and nose fit into that cut down on the carbon dioxide um,
Oh.
amount inside the helmet. It provides for communication. It provides a platform to put lights and cameras on, and it's part of a package. I mean, we call the helmet is obviously what's on your head. You still wear a bottle on your back, a
Uh-huh.
bailout bottle, in case for some reason the surface supplied air that is being provided to you as the diver while you're doing your job should be compromised. You can go on to bailout
Uh-huh.
and try to get yourself off bottom, or buy a little time until they figure out where the problem went wrong. You wear a harness that attaches an umbilical. A diver's umbilical is your lifeline, so to speak. You have your air supply there. You have the strength member in case you really need to come up hard and fast on someone in the water. You've got a strength member that's going to be able to
Oh.
support that. You have a communications cable. You have something called a pneumofathometer, and it's an open-ended tube that basically the topside supervisor will be able to accurately monitor your depth in the water. You have your lights and camera cable. And then, if you're lucky enough and you work for a company that's progressive enough, they'll actually provide the diver with hot water. And it's like hot
Wow.
water is cooked in a boiler on the surface, and it's sent down the hose to the diver, and it plugs into an oversized wetsuit with perforated tubing that run up the head, the back, legs, and arms. And you're almost in a personal jacuzzi. And it's amazing because we work in water as cold as freezing, or I've actually been in water below freezing, but because it was moving, it hadn't yet solidified. And when you're in that kind of water, it doesn't matter how tough you are. After a certain period
Yeah.
of time, your mind begins to wander and go off task. But having
Yeah.
that hot water, being bathed in nice, warm water, will definitely keep you focused.
Oh, I
So
can't imagine I say luxury, but probably after you experience it, it doesn't feel like a luxury. It feels like a safety item. I can't
it's
imagine what an improvement that would be to those guys.
massive, massive, massive. And a lot of times we're in the water from anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. And if you're in the water for 4 to 6 hours, you really do begin to appreciate that. Summer months, there's not in the rivers and shallow water, there's not really a need for it. But when the water gets below 50 degrees, and it sort of overcomes the abilities of a dry suit to keep you warm and comfortable and focused and on track of what the work at hand is, you definitely appreciate that hot water.
Oh, that's amazing. So, kind of circling back to is it the UBC, the union acronym there? The
Yeah, the United Brotherhood of
Yeah,
Carpenters
yeah,
and Joiners
UBC.
of America.
So anyway, is underwater welding underneath their umbrella of
It
trades?
it
Just
sure is. Yeah,
across, like oil tankers or I'm sorry, oil rigs. Those underwater welders are likely a part of this union also.
actually, they are not. And
Oh,
we'll talk. Hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about union structure and market shares and things like that. But the
yeah.
petroleum industry down in the Gulf of Mexico is historically a non-union
Oh,
arena. And so we don't have a lot of union presence. I think it was post Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, that came through some years ago. There was a huge vacuum in the Gulf of Mexico, and they brought in a lot of our union contractors to get the work done.
I
But
see.
historically, the petroleum industry, one of the arguably one of the richest industries in the world, is notorious for not paying their divers very well. And
Huh.
so we
Oh,
because
interesting.
of the lack of a union presence.
Hmm.
So here in the Pacific Northwest, for example, we're union strong in the diving world, and most of the contractors of size and ability here in the Northwest are union contractors. And
Okay.
through those negotiated wages, divers make a really solid living. And again, going back to what you were talking about with underwater welding, yes, it is part of the UBC structure. But again, with 500,000 members across the U.S. and Canada, I think if I remember clearly, we're somewhere just around 1,200 unionized divers with
Okay.
strongholds here in the Northwest, in the Midwest, like in Chicago area, and definitely over on the East Coast of you know uh, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and those areas. But you start drifting south, and we south down into Florida and the Gulf, and we lose market share, and the wages plummet because of that.
Yeah. Interesting. So in the Northwest, for example, again, when I think of underwater, not just welding, but let's just say um, work,
Yeah.
I think of oil and I think of military as like the two, I don't know, areas where there's I can imagine like a lot of work needing to be done. What other types of places and people are hiring underwater welders for, construction?
Okay, great question. And again, the romantic notion, Nate, of a diver welding underwater is really just that. It's a romantic notion.
Yeah.
We don't really do that much welding. Most of the
Huh.
things that are put into the water that have been welded are welded topside. They're inspected. They're powder coated or
Uh-huh.
painted. They're sent down and then they're flanged and bolted up.
Got
Flanged
it.
up and put together by divers underwater. We really do try to get away from underwater welding because it really is time consuming and it
Yeah.
is a very very specialized. I can stick metal together underwater. Don't get me wrong, but it's truly an art form. Welding in and of itself is an art form on the surface. When you put some underwater, it's just a long, tedious process, and not
Yeah.
everyone is a Picasso. You know,
Yeah.
not everyone has that same ability, and so we'd much contractors and customers would much rather have it welded topside, inspected,
Yeah.
painted, put in the water, and bolted together. So, to answer your question, what else does a diver do if they're not down there for hours on end burning welding rods? We do a lot of work for the Army Corps of Engineers here in the Pacific Northwest. The Columbia River and the Snake River have a tremendous amount of Army Corps dams, starting with
Uh-huh.
Bonneville, which is the first dam upstream from Astoria, and then you have the Dalles Dam, John Day Dam, McNary Dam, all the way up the Columbia River. All of those dams over the last 20 years have gone through a lot of retrofits to try to make suitable passage for the small smolt and fry after the salmon go upriver and spawn. Those small smolt and fry, when they start exiting or leaving their spawning ground, so to speak, heading out to the ocean to mature, have to make it past these dams. And they only have a couple options. They either go through the turbines or they go through the spillways, and both of them are just horrible. A turbine is
Yeah.
basically a giant blender, and a spillway just disorients those small smolt and fry to such a level that they're easy pickings on the downstream side for birds of prey and things like that. So over the years, I've made a fairly good living on those dams, putting in safe passage that environmentalists would first identify as viable means of rerouting the fish around there. We'd put
Huh.
in prototypes, we'd put in monitoring gear, and then the studies would go on. We'd pull all that stuff out. They may revise what we put in the water one season, modify it a little bit, put it in the next season, and then eventually we'd put in the full size structure. And again, it's all about allowing safe passage for those smaller fish to make it downstream. Heading upstream,
Huh.
the adult salmon fish ladders work really well.
Yeah.
There was a period of time a few years back where we were actually helping the lamprey eels to be able to make safe passage upstream because a lamprey eel doesn't use the same sort of flying out of the water technique that salmon do to get over these
Right.
fish ladders.
Huh.
Lampreys have a different, and so they actually made almost like a sluice gate for them to climb up.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so
That,
it's
that is
interesting
cool.
work. We do a
Hmm.
lot of salvage work. There's a lot of work on bridges as well. Salvage work, I'll back up a little bit. We do a lot of salvage work, usually the bigger salvage work, some of the bigger ships that have had some difficulty on the Columbia River. There's the emergency call outs as well for the different tug lines here in the Northwest. And we do a lot of just intake work. So if any industry, be it a farm out in Hermiston or be it an aluminum plant here in Portland, they're drawing water in from the river. You can't just have a big open pipe sucking in whatever on the river. You have to have some sort of filtration system, and those
Yeah.
are what we call intakes. And then a lot of times after the plant or factory or whatever has utilized that water and cleaned it up and it's getting ready to go back into the river, they actually have outflows, and
Huh.
those always need repair as well. Installing duct bills, cleaning out the pipes, things like that. So, yeah, the diving community is really a tight community here in the Pacific Northwest. I think there's about 140 to 160 folks like myself before I retired from the trade who actually make a living
Huh.
full time as commercial divers.
Wow, that is so interesting. It's one of these things that is existing right alongside me. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, but everywhere around the world, this expertise and these careers and this critical, almost like infrastructure work that's happening that most people just really don't think about much,
Right,
if
and
at
with
all.
diving, we're out of sight, out of mind. You know,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, you can't
the
even see
dive
them.
dive crews were usually remote,
Right.
and then the divers themselves are underwater, so you only see them when they come up and switch out, and the next person gets in.
Anytime
So
I
it's
jump in the water and I see like a structure, like maybe it's like a dock pier or even the bottom of a boat, I just get this creepy feeling. And I'm what does that ever like pass and you ever kind of feel less creepy looking at structures underwater, or is that just part of the job?
I think, at a certain point, it's part of the job. I was always fascinated by it. I remember the very first dive out of my recreational dive class that I took back in the late '70s. I was in the Sacramento River, and my buddy and we kind of messed up on our planning a little bit, and we were diving solo because we only had one backpack to hold our tank on. And here I am, 12 years old. If my dad's listening now, he's shaking his head. But 12 years old, my buddy went down first, dropped about 40 feet into the Sacramento River in a little eddy there. And he goes, "Man, it's going to be creepy when you get down there." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "All the salmon had spawned and died. And it's just like a mass graveyard down there." And I was like, "Oh." So again, my very first dive out of class, the number one thing they say is always dive with a buddy. Well, what am I doing? Not diving with a buddy. I get
Yeah.
this gear on. I drop down nice and slow through the water column, and it goes dark pretty quick, and it's kind of murky until I get about 5 feet off bottom. And the first thing I see when I get close to bottom and the visibility turns crystal clear is just hundreds and
Oh,
hundreds of dead salmon there, and just different uh, um, arrays of decay. And yeah, it was interesting. So that started me off. Since
whoa.
then, I've seen some amazing things, some big animal encounters. After I exited the military, I ended up teaching scuba diving for 8 years in the South Pacific and the Caribbean. I was really, really fortunate to be able to work in countries like Australia and Thailand and Mexico and just in Fiji, and just really enjoyed those interactions with the marine life, with the big animals, and with the customers as well. I would literally teach people to feel comfortable in a completely foreign and exotic world. And I
Wow.
enjoyed the heck out of that. But when I turned 29, I realized when I was in the country of Sweden, where I had followed one of my students to her homeland, that things were going to need to change. And that's why I had to shift gear from teaching scuba diving and get back into my roots. And that again goes back to the hard hat diving that I had knowledge that
I
I had gained
see.
in the military.
So that's when it became a little more commercial oriented in terms of the building and construction underwater work as opposed to the more recreational side, even though there is a money to be made and certainly a lot of people earning a living focusing on that aspect of diving, but you kind of recentered to the commercial aspect.
Yeah, I definitely had to. I mean, after 8 years of teaching diving in all these remote locales, I really had a tan that was fading fast, and a bank account that was fading even faster. So I was
Yeah,
happy to have had the opportunity in the military to get a skill set that I could
right.
fall back on, and it turned out to be the best decision I could have made. After having left Sweden as a commercial diver there for a few years, working inland primarily, I ended up here in the Northwest and stumbled into my union job, and I did not know much about unions. I think we talked about this
Yeah.
earlier, and I just like you, I didn't really know much about unions. I didn't know what they provided and the structure and the opportunity that was in front of me. And I'm so glad that I did recognize it and grab hold of that opportunity when it presented itself.
So let's talk about unions a little bit, and maybe your experience is a perfect place to start because I've always had this conception that getting, let's say, a union job or I don't know, just getting involved is challenging. I've always thought of like the union guys as like the highest level expert. They get paid the most. They are really well trained, and I just always assumed that those jobs are tough to get. But how does someone go about getting trained to work for a union? You said you kind of stumbled
Yeah.
into it, which I'm sure there's a story there. But if someone's listening to this and they also don't know a lot about unions, but they, they're tracking with us, how do you explain
Right.
this to them?
Yeah, well, they are. I won't say they're hard to get. They are hard to retain because obviously, as union carpenters, whether you're a commercial diver, a general carpenter, an EIS specialist, a millwright, scaffold director, or pile driver, we do demand a higher um, wage of living. Okay, through collective bargaining, we've already negotiated that with our union contractors. And so we, right off the bat, have a livable wage as a
Hmm.
union member. We also earn benefits, medical, dental, and vision benefits for our not only for the member for their families as well. Add to that a pension package that we are being contributed to. Uh, Access to training, which keeps us definitely on the cutting edge of technology and advances in construction. We have representation through union representation that look out for our best interest on the job. And then we also have safer working conditions. So all of those things, Scott, all of that comes at a premium, and no one is digging into their pockets. A customer, when given the opportunity between paying a higher premium for a union contractor or a non-union
Hmm.
contractor, is digging in their pockets to give money to the union contractors because we're better looking. Because we we roll up in nicer rigs. No, we are better value for those customers, and that is the bottom line. There's people out there that would just eat our lunch on a day-to-day basis if we did not provide better value and a bottom line. We get work done on time. We get it under budget. We get it with fewer callbacks. We do quality work with less accidents, and that's
Huh.
that's the beauty of having training and someone who can enforce regulations. And that's basically what a union does. Our carpenters union, I like to say, is been around 140 years, not in the business of carpentry, but really in the business of bettering its members' lives. Carpentry is a byproduct. Everything that we do is a byproduct of us being able to focus on our job and having the skills to get it done. And that is one of the bigger things. And not to speak disparagingly about folks who are maybe listening and not in a union, but there are a lot of benefits, and a lot of people have them to being in a union. And a lot of people have a misconception that unions are, all they want is my money. Oh, they just want my union dues. Well, absolutely. I mean, unions in and of themselves are a for-profit business. You need to have income coming in to our organization to keep it viable. And I once heard someone say, if you want to help a few people out, start a nonprofit. You want to help a
Hmm.
bunch of people out, start a for-profit. And that's sort of the structure of the union. It takes money to hold the organization together, to be able to work with politicians to pass laws that are favorable, not just for union contractors, but for non-union contractors. And those are prevailed wage laws, both on the state and the federal level. So unions kind of run deep in their expectation that the people that work for them are going to be motivated to get the job done and you work with pride and professionalism. And I think that's kind of where I'd like to go with the next question. I hope you have.
Yeah, well, for sure. So talk about getting involved in a union in terms of a career, because I'm past the point in my life where I'm thinking about my career in terms of like what am I going to do? It's like I'm turning 40 in a couple months, and so that ship has sailed. But I think often about when I was younger, thinking about that and how many options there are that I did not know about at all. For example, these apprenticeship programs, like we have a community college not far from here that offers some apprenticeship programs, and I did a semester at that community college, but I took like an English class and a German class and a music theory class. I didn't know there was an electrician's apprenticeship program class happening like one building over. And I didn't know that electricians like come out of the gate making, I don't know what back then, but I'm sure it was way more than I was
Right.
expecting. I didn't know that. And so, anyways, unions have do they have a separate type of apprenticeship route, or is it the same uh, thing just taught by different teachers? Talk about
We
from
we
someone getting
absolutely do
into it.
have an apprenticeship a structure to our apprenticeships, but I'd like to, before I address that, actually go into that more of a systemic issue with kids in high school, not being given a viable pathway of the trades as an
Hmm.
option when they're gearing to graduate. Everyone for decades now has been pushed towards college. College is the only way to financial security and professional success in America, and it's become pretty glaringly obvious that that is a fallacy. That people that find themselves in a $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 debt can actually literally walk out of a 4-year program at the University of Washington or University of Oregon or Oregon State or Harvard or wherever you're going to college and actually find you're holding a piece of paper that was rendered obsolete the week before because of
Hmm.
advances in technology, or worse yet, had been shipped offshore because someone found it was easier to get people that could get the work done but didn't need that fancy degree to have it done.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. I've been in contact with a lot of uh, career counselors lately who are beginning to see that they're not quite setting their charges up for success. That the people that they are supposed to be helping find a future by directing them solely to college is not doing them any justice. And so it's become again really apparent that the blue collar trades, the building trades, are offering viable pathways to middle class lifestyle in America that with in jobs with dignity, their first choice careers. So our organization, the Pacific Northwest Carpenters Institute, is one of these regional training centers for the UBC that will take people that are green as new mowed grass and show them what end of the hammer to hold, kind of like what your dad does, Scott does.
Hmm.
Show them how to mark on a board from very basic entry folks. And then after 4 years of a tuition free construction college, give them a skill set that can't again be rendered obsolete overnight or outsourced. The work that's being done here in the US and Canada is being done by workers that have the skills to do so. And so I'm really really fortunate to have exited my chosen career as a commercial diver to find an opportunity at PNCI, and now I am the coordinator for the millwrights, pile drivers, and our carpenters and EIS specialist in Central Oregon, like the Bend, Prineville,
Wow.
Redmond area.
Did you say tuition free?
It is
And
tuition free, sir. Absolutely. So you have to apply to the program, and we have a vetting process. It starts by filling out an application on pnci.org. Once your application is submitted, and you are then invited to what we call a pre-hire. It's a way to find out more about the organization, the structure of the unions, the structure of the apprenticeship, the expectations of our union contractors. You
Mhm.
go through that online pre-hire. The next step is an interview, and you're actually interviewed by two sides of the table: the union contractor side and the union side, and people that have worked in your particular trade. So if you're interested in being a pile driver, for instance, the folks that are going to be asking you the questions are from that field, and they're going to try to get a sense of what your driving purpose is. Is pile driving, is this going to be an opportunity for you to better your life and give you a career that you are truly interested in? Or is this something you're just kind of trying to stick your foot in the pool, and test the water and see if that's all right? The reality is our member supported apprenticeship programs. And so we're really selective because we want to make sure that our members' money is being uh, utilized well. And no one wants to see someone get in and spend a year or two and decide that this wasn't for them. So we're selective on the
I see.
front end. The work eventually will weed out, the folks that truly didn't want to be there. And it's a difficult, as you know, Nate. Construction is a difficult industry, but if you can get that application in, that pre-hire done, that interview done, and get yourself onto a union job through a dispatch, then you begin your apprenticeship. And it is a 4-year long tuition free construction college. The only thing that you're on the hook for at the end of 4 years is about a little under $300 worth of books and materials. Everything else
Wow.
is taken care of. It's the best kept secret in the building trades, the union
Yeah, I
apprenticeships.
have this like skeptical, like it doesn't make sense. So because it obviously costs a lot of money to educate and hire
About
the
twenty
teachers
thousand
and
dollars.
the facilities. It's exactly like I understand why college is expensive, because it costs a lot of money to run a college and all of the things, all of everything that goes with it. And this is a little different, but a lot of those same costs exist. So in other words, someone can leave their 4-year apprenticeship program and owe $300 and have
A career.
a career like a certification or a journeyman level or whatever maybe there's a
Absolutely.
level before journeyman, but they're qualified to apply
To
for a position
Yeah,
somewhere.
as you'll have a journey level card and you have the skills. Again, your learning doesn't stop once you
Yeah,
exit our training program. Now you have the next 15, 20, 25 years of your life to continue to refine your craft. But
yeah.
it does sound too good to be true, but every hour that a union member works here in the Pacific Northwest, $1.07 of that goes to funding our education programs, either for the apprentices or for the journey level workers. So if
Mm.
a member works 2,000 hours a year, there's $2,000 going into a slush fund that we use to fund these apprenticeship programs and the continuing education programs that are both our apprentices
Hmm.
and journey level workers can take advantage of to keep themselves competitive so that we can offer more opportunities for our contractors.
How often are people applying who are like, let's say, like a little deeper in their career? They're maybe not right out of high school, but maybe they're in their 30s or 40s. Are people kind of using this as a new start for a total? We get a lot of emails from people who are not satisfied with like a job they have, and you mentioned romanticizing underwater welding. Well, we see that and get emails with people romanticizing every aspect of construction. Like, I just want to be swinging a hammer, in the sun. And it does like sound nice. And maybe there's moments that are very nice. There's also a lot of moments that are a lot of
It's
work.
tough and grueling, and yeah,
Yeah.
but it's deeply satisfying when you have those step back moments when you and a crew have finished a project and you can step
Yeah.
back and put your hands on your hips and realize that you have just built something that is going to be there for generations. I call it
Yeah.
generational wealth. That bridge, that school, that courthouse, that stadium, that is generational wealth, and that is something that in decades from now, your kids or your grandkids will be able to point at and say, "Yeah, granddad built that courthouse."
Yeah.
And it's something that so many of the um, uh, the college degrees are not preparing people for. A lot of that is you push a button and your work goes away, and maybe someone sees it, maybe someone just brown files it, and you never know.
Yeah.
So it is interesting, this turn, because there is a definite skills gap growing in America and Canada, where there's just not enough people to do
Yeah.
that hard work, and so many people are convinced that oh, carpentry or the building trades are for folks that couldn't cut it in college. Well, no, not everyone is designed for higher education to that
Hmm.
level, that college degree. People that like to not only work with their hands but work with their head are the ones that are out there building the infrastructure of America. So
Hmm.
we need to start bridging that skills gap, and one of the ways that we're really working on it here at in our organization, the UBC, is through development of leaders and through communication development, and making sure that we have people that not only can do the work but can inspire other people to do their best on the job. And that has been one of the major cultural shifts in construction industry. I mean, decades ago, and I'm sure your dad knows about it, safety was sort of an afterthought.
Hmm.
Production, get her done first, and we'll worry about safety last. That's changed. Obviously, we're a very litigious society and people like to sue the heck out of each other, so it made good sense to try to cut down on the amount of accidents and injuries on the job. And so safety has become one of those major cultural shifts in the building trades. Drugs and alcohol is
Hmm.
zero tolerance now, and so many contractors again are really enforcing that, which is fantastic, because you don't want to be
Hmm.
working at heights or underwater or moving heavy steel
Yeah.
or wiring up anything and have somebody who's not fully cognizant next to you. And then this last cultural shift really has been about leadership development and communication training, and making sure that we have the ability to respect each other on the job, that we encourage each other to do their best, and to really meet our customers' needs through that level of professionalism that seemed to be
So
lacking in
does that
generations
mean like
past.
in addition to teaching the trade skills, they come out having classes and time learning these leadership principles and how to communicate better? Is that what you mean by teaching leadership, or,
Absolutely.
or is it a separate type of person you're training to communicate and
Nope.
teach these separate?
No, I like to start because, again, having transitioned out of the field into my coordinator position and an instructor at the PNCI, I work a lot with the first and second term, people that are just coming straight in, don't have a whole lot of experience. And I
Yeah.
start planting those seeds of leadership and communication from day one, because
Mm.
over the next 4 years, as they work their way through our program, it's going to be reinforced, and their amount of responsibility is going to be increased, and they need to be able to lead crews. So I think it's super important to start that from the very get-go, and not wait until someone has exited our program, and not wait till they're recognized as someone who can get the work done, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey man, that guy really can frame up, get that framing done, or lay down those weld beads or whatever. You'd make a great foreman. And now they're stuck. They're a craftsperson who's now been thrust into this management position without any
Right.
education and
Yeah.
focus on leadership and communication. So there's no better time than the very first day of the very first class of a 4-year long
Huh.
construction college. And that's my approach, and a lot of the folks that within our organization, that is what we pride ourselves on now. The UBC is developing leaders in the
Yeah, that's really
organization.
cool. There's so many jobs that you take, and I've had a lot where you kind of get there and you're told like, okay, this is what you do this thing, and you might do it for whatever, a month or years without knowing what comes after that or what you could evolve into by mastering that. Almost like you have like blinders on, like this is what I do. So, and I actually think about high school and education that way, where we are educating kids on lots of things, but some of the basics like financial decision
Management.
making and how insurance works, which kind of never got mentioned in those situations. It kind of reminds me of that. Like these skills are important, but without these all other important skills, you can, I don't know, put yourself in a box a little bit. And from minute one for a kid or a new hire, thinking like, okay, this is what you're going to do, and after a few years, you might be operating that machine or driving that equipment, or I don't know, something else. That I could see that being very inspiring for someone who has like a more mundane part of the job at the moment, to understand like, oh, I can see a bigger
The-
picture than just task at hand.
Absolutely right. And like you said just a few minutes ago, in regards to opportunity, our average apprentice that comes into PNCI is 27 years old. So we're not getting
Oh,
kids right out of high school. We get very few kids right out of high school,
huh.
because it's a different generation, and again, the system hasn't really directed them towards the trades. So we get people that may have gone to college, maybe liked it, maybe didn't, and or went out and did some other type of work experiences, and then one way or another found out about the union apprenticeships. And so 27 years old is our average apprentice. And it's great to see the transformation in people. I see both ends of the spectrum where I work at PNCI, because again, I work a lot with the first and second term people that are coming straight in, don't
Hmm.
know much about the trades. And then I also teach OSHA and CPR first aid, which is one of the very last classes they get at PNCI. And the transformation between a first termer and an eighth termer is remarkable. Someone that is getting ready to journey out, the amount of self confidence, the amount of skills, how they hold themselves, how they communicate, is just really, really. Impressive, and it makes me really proud to be part of an organization that can provide opportunity for someone in the trades, and treat it like a profession, and not something that, yeah, I couldn't figure out anything else to do in life. No, this is a first
Hmm.
choice career, and a career that again is going to provide for you and your family for decades to come. If you take care of yourself and you put in the hard work, man, I've profited greatly from it. And again, I stumbled into it. I did not know what I was getting into, but I am so thankful that I have, because at age 57, I'm just very close to being able to retire if I wanted to, which is phenomenal, with a really solid retirement. So
Yeah.
I
Which is,
can't
yeah,
say enough
wow.
about the unions and the building trades, and the importance of development of leaders. And that's why I started the Grit Nation podcast, which I'm hoping we're going to be able to get into here in a little bit. About a year and a half ago, I did start my own podcast to address a lot of the things that we've been talking about, to shine a positive light on what it means to be someone working in the blue collar trades in North America, and the opportunities that are available to us. And my podcast, much like yours, I interview people, industry experts, people that are have a lot to say about what it means to hold a job with dignity in the building trades. And I'm
You've had a lot of
especially.
really interesting guests on there, and a nice variety of just different types of experts with different views on these things. Has that been? I'm assuming it's been interesting. What kind of things have you learned, and in what ways has hosting this podcast and having these conversations changed how you've even thought about, maybe your own career and your own things you already thought you knew a lot about?
Yeah, it's amazing to me. The more I learn, the more I recognize how little I thought I knew, or how little I really knew. Every time I meet someone that adds a little bit more depth to what labor history is and the struggles that it took to get things that we take for granted nowadays. The weekend, 2 days off, Saturday and Sunday, 48 hours back to back, is a fairly new construct in the larger arc of mankind. I mean, it's only been really 100, just over 100 years that the weekends have been here. Yet we grew up with weekends. Our folks grew up with weekends. Their grandparents may or may not knew what a weekend was, and their great grandparents definitely didn't know what they were. So understanding the role that uh, when organized labor bands together to fight for things like time off, safer working conditions. It's huge. I've learned a lot about again communication. I talked with a lot of people that are leaders in the industry, like Ken Rusk, who wrote a book called Blue Collar Cash. And again, Ken's recently been on with Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs on a video that is addressing that skills gap that we talked about earlier. So having the opportunity to talk with someone like Ken Rusk was amazing. I interviewed a motivational lifestyle coach, if you will, named Brian Bogart on the show. And Brian Bogart, at the age of 7, literally had his left arm ripped off his body in a parking lot of Walmart in Arizona by a pickup truck. And fortunately for him, was able to have it reattached. And listening to Brian's story and how he did not allow that adversity to permanently stain the rest of his life, and the inspiration that he and the strength that he drew from that injury early on in his life is truly inspirational. And it just talks about the tenacity, determination, the grit that is needed to get through day-to-day work, and if you're in the construction industry, to get through your day-to-day on the job.
I listened to that interview and I've been thinking about it nonstop because I have kids. And it's funny how when you listen to a conversation like that, and he didn't dwell on the accident for very long, he had a lot of other important things to talk about. But isn't it funny how you can hear just something that somebody might say or something they even heard that really just sticks? And like I said, I've always been aware of safety with kids in parking lots, but I'm telling you, I think about it differently after listening to that and thinking, wow. And he wasn't even being like, reckless running around. He was kind of just standing there
Just
for,
being a kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah,
wild? Yeah.
yeah,
Just
it's
hearing these things and being able to like absorb these stories that are, happen. I would have never known had you not taken the time to put that together. It's pretty cool.
well, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a labor of love. When I first started the podcast a year and a half ago, I knew I liked to listen to podcasts. I wanted to be able to reach a larger audience. I didn't quite have an understanding of how well received the show would be. So when it first started, it was Grit Northwest, a Carpenters Union podcast, and I thought, well, just my students and some local folks. But when you put things out on the World Wide Web and through word of mouth, the show began to grow and grow and grow. And so I figured, let's rebrand it to Grit Nation, the Building Trades podcast, and let's make it more accessible to folks. And it's not heavy unionism at all. It's about just shining a positive light on people that choose to do the hard work of building, again, the
Yeah.
infrastructure of America. And then I approach uh, the subjects by what interests me. I've listened to a lot of other podcasts that deal with labor specific issues, and they really seem to get deep in the weeds pretty fast. And that, I'm sure they have an audience for that, but I like a more well-rounded variety, and meeting people and different discussions of what it means to be a craftsperson in the U.S. Kind of like your show here. It's just it's interesting, it's informative, and like you say, you don't have to be hit over the head hard to get the message. You can pick out what you want out of it, and it sounds like you and an attention to kids in parking lots seem to resonate. So I'm happy if I can reach out and affect a few people's lives for the better. I feel like I'm doing a good job, and I'll
Yeah.
continue
Not to
putting that
mention
show
just
out.
giving people a chance to get something from the horse's mouth. Like I learned a lot about unions from listening to your show, and I just really only know and have known what you hear from others. And there's just so much um, I don't know. Everybody has like their own experience that give them the reasons why they might have a strong opinion about things, which is perfectly fair. But it's pretty cool to have a conversation or even just listen to a conversation with someone who might have had a quite different experience with a could be a union in that topic, but even just trades in general and careers like that is quite different than something I would have come across on my own. And like I said, hearing about unions in this way is pretty. My only other experience firsthand with unions was my buddy had a next door neighbor who was a union boss. I don't know if that's, and I know it's not a technical career. That's all I knew.
That
My
sounds like
buddy
the
said,
mafia there.
I know. That's what I thought too. He's like, oh, if this he was a really skilled woodworker. He was in his garage just like building stuff, and he was retired. And my buddy just, yeah, he was a union boss for a long time, and a really cool guy. And it's literally all I knew is like, oh, I asked him once or twice, like, what was that like? He was from back east, and he had some interesting stories. But anyways, I really appreciate that you're putting this stuff out there and bringing awareness. That what you shared about that tuition program at your school there of giving people this training and this apprenticeship program for basically nothing. Obviously, they have to apply and kind of earn the right to be there. But wow, talk about talk about a life-changing podcast for somebody who might listen, if not this one, maybe something else you're doing where they might go down that route and really help them out. So keep it up.
Yeah, I sure hope so. Again, whether it's going to be in carpentry with the UBC or the steel workers union, the electrical workers union, the plumbers union, the laborers, all have great programs. I'm particularly proud of the UBC, and again, towards our emphasis in not just getting people who can do the work, but lead the work. And if you're
Yeah.
interested, going to carpenters.org, carpenters with an S.org will get you to the UBC's website, or you can visit pnci.org, or you can give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk with you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, for our listeners, this is coming in a few months, but my dad's going to be on your show, and I think he was a member of the Carpenters Union for a period of time. I don't know exactly. I was a little kid, but when we lived in Las Vegas, I believe for a few years he was a
Yeah,
member of the union. I don't know. You'll have to ask him about it. So if our
I,
listeners are curious to hear some of that about my dad and his interaction there, as well as wherever else you take that conversation, that's coming in a few months. Once that post, we will link to it in the
oh,
show
that'd be
notes
great.
here,
Yeah.
so people can, if they enjoy hearing this, they can kind of move to that conversation. And Joe, thanks so much for taking the time and keep up the good work. I just love how you're inspiring training and moving the trades forward. There's a lot of different ways that that's done, and certainly the way you're involved is a critical one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on your show, Nate. This has been a lot of fun.
All right, we'll do it again soon. Thanks again.
All right. Take care. Have a great day.